Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. I was just enjoying this delightful book. Care to join me? There have been many book to movie adaptations over the years, but in this particular video, we're going to be talking about book to animation adaptations, what have made some good and others not so much. Well, let's get right into it. Now, to be fair, most movies are loosely based off of books, meaning some of the characters or even major plot points are taken from the book and integrated into the movie. Again, since it's loosely based, it's not going to include every single event or factor that appeared in the original story, either because the writers and directors have a different vision for what they think should happen in the story is too long to fit into usually a 90-minute film, and of course the opposite where they don't have a lot of material to work with from the start, so they must add superfluous subplots and characters that didn't appear in the original works to fill in time, often to the movie's detriment. This obviously isn't always the case, as there have been many films that have handled this pretty well. So there are generally three things that make a good animated book adaptation. Number 1, the narrative. How well does it stay true to the story as well as expand on it? Number 2, characters. Is it able to really capture the true spirit and personality of the characters from the source material? Number 3, visuals. In other words, the animation. Does it look good? Is it able to create a fleshed out universe where the story takes place? Do the designs of the characters and stylization reflect that of the author's intentions? A good example of an animated movie that basically gets all of these right is Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. Going into this movie after it had been released, I had pretty subdued expectations. I had read some of the Captain Underpants books as a child and really enjoyed them. They were like the perfect mix between juvenile, scatological humor for young children and bold wit for older kids. But seeing as how Hollywood is too often overly reliant on crude humor and poop jokes to carry a movie, I was pretty skeptical going into this movie. But it was surprisingly very good. Starting off with the story, which is pretty simple and easy to follow. It consistently keeps the plot moving forward, and when it does slow down, it is to emphasize the characters' personalities in quiet individual moments, which not only makes George and Harold seem like more than just a pair of likable silly young boys, but also very close friends who have a certain amount of depth to them. This is partially due to the voice actors, who do an unexpectedly great job at bringing life to these characters. This is probably even more surprising, considering how in my last video, I mentioned how I don't really care for adults playing children usually. I guess this and Gravity Falls is the exception. The other half that makes it good is the animation, which is another good example of how to translate 2D drawings to 3D animation well. The characters, though simple, are uber expressive and move very smoothly. Paired with a nice balance of potty humor and clever exchanges, you have a movie that is a very enjoyable experience. But for every good movie, there's always a bad, or in this case, mediocre one. I never really read the Wimpy Kid books when I was younger, or really even watched a lot of the movies, so I kinda went into this movie blindly, and it was passable. Yeah, nothing really bad or offensive, but nothing really great either. The translation of the 2D style to 3D doesn't look as well realized as, say, other works, meaning the character designs do feel a bit off. I mean, look at Baby Bro. But even if the animation is lacking, similar to Captain Underpants, Greg and Rowley are very likable as the movie's main characters, and pretty decently written in their exchanges and general attitudes as kids entering their preteen stage of life. But the rest of the characters and performances are sadly forgettable, as is the whole movie. It does stay very true to the narrative of the original book, but that's sadly another issue with this film. Because it feels so rushed and calculated, it doesn't leave a ton of room for creativity in the animation and even humor. So unfortunately, nothing really innovative or exciting here, but it is a serviceable if not passable made for streaming movie. And I'm sure fans of the book will get something out of this. So not really based on one single book like the rest, more of just lots and lots of comic strips and even old cartoons. Either way, the Peanuts movie is just a really pleasant watching experience, right up there with Paddington. A really fantastic example of being able to update the look of a particular story, but still stay true to its source material and heart that makes the originals so beloved. This could have so easily become another bloated Hollywood production, but thankfully it never settles for weak pop culture references and child pandering jokes, which is so refreshing. Especially when so many new reboots and shows are trying way too hard to be relevant and woke. Thankfully, Peanuts is fully satisfied with being simple, from the story to the dialogue, and it just radiates charm because of it. But man, does talking about this movie really make me miss blue skies. Speaking of which, the classic story of an elephant who discovers a whole universe the size of a speck, and must overcome challenges to get them to safety. Oh, how nice it is to have a Dr. Seuss movie that's actually great. I mean, sure, it's not perfect, but still! This has a lot to do with director Steve Martino, who actually directed the Peanuts movie. It seems to be pretty great at doing the original content justice when adapting it into a mainstream movie production, because Horton Hears a Who is just a really fun movie. The characters and setting design both capture Seuss's whimsical and eccentric art style very well. And boy, was this movie really ahead of its time with a lot of its writing and humor. And wow, there were obviously some anime fans on the animation team because they really went all out. And even though the main characters are often very silly and exaggerated, the movie still is able to portray them as sympathetic. Horton, who is just a good-hearted person living in a world where no one supports him, and the mayor, who is not only carrying the weight of keeping his enormous family safe, but also the entire town. And it's through these struggles that Horton and the mayor are able to connect. Sure, the humor can be a bit hit or miss, but all in all, Horton Hears a Who is an animated book adaptation done right. So I have nothing against this movie personally. I don't even think it's really a bad movie per se, but I definitely wouldn't call it a great movie either. The movie is separated into two stories, one involving the traditional story with the Lorax, and then the other with a 12-year-old boy, who sounds like he's 18 for some reason, being the recipient of this story. And it basically follows a pattern of a lot of Illumination's most recent efforts. It's really gorgeous to look at, but man, is there really not a lot going on under the hood. Now, as far as the characters at their most basic level, they aren't very interesting. Neither do they have good motivations that I can really get behind. The main character, Ted, is supposed to be going on a quest to save the environment because he actually cares about the earth, but in this movie it's because he has a crush on an older teenage girl? Ugh, or at least it comes off that way. It would have been better if he was actually genuinely curious about nature in the past. Heck, even if he started off liking the girl and then over the course of the story became more and more invested in saving the planet, it would have been so much better than this. I never really got the vibe he was interested in the story because he was really into it, but more of just to get the seed, ergo get the girl. So I guess the moral of this story is, you should help the planet and even others, but only for your own personal gain. But yeah, at face value, it's still a totally acceptable family film and will provide a colorful distraction for young viewers, but sadly it doesn't try to be anything more than that. You would think that making a movie based on a book would literally write itself, but in the end it is a lot harder than it seems. But thankfully, when done right, a good book adaptation can really touch our hearts. And with animation, the sky's the limit when it comes to creativity and world building. So I guess this wasn't really a worst to best or even ranking, but more of me just freely expressing my thoughts on different animated book adaptations. So which movie from this list is your favorite adaptation? I am genuinely interested to know. Please hit the red button, it's free, and remember to keep it spicy.